All right, let's dive into this. Studying medicine in Canada. Specifically, we've got a bunch of resources here geared towards Indian students. And it seems like becoming a doctor up north, it's not your typical MBBS path, right?
Yeah, Canada's got its own unique system. You won't actually find an MBBS degree there.
Really? Okay, so then what do they call it? What's the medical degree there?
It's a Doctor of Medicine, MD.
But that's where things get interesting.
How so?
Well, unlike some other places, you don't just go straight into medical school after high school. You actually need a bachelor's degree first.
So it's like a two-step process. First, a bachelor's, then 4 years of med school.
Exactly. It means a longer commitment overall, yeah. 7 to 11 years total, depending on what you specialize in and your residency.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference. So why would students choose this path? What makes the Canadian MD so special?
It's globally recognized, for one. You can practice in Canada, of course, but also tons of other countries. Plus, Canada has some seriously prestigious medical schools. I bet. I've heard great things about the University of Toronto. Their research is supposed to be top-notch.
Oh, absolutely. And McGill, their medical training is incredibly advanced. But each university has its own strengths, like McMaster University. They're known for their problem-based learning.
Problem-based learning, that sounds pretty hands-on.
It is. Students are solving medical cases from day one, not just sitting through lectures.
I can see how that would appeal to some people. So a Canadian medical education really sets you up well, but I imagine getting into these programs, it's got to be super competitive.
Oh, it definitely is, especially for international students. You need a really strong foundation.
What do you mean, like in terms of grades?
Yep, a good GPA in your bachelor's is key. And most universities, they also require the MCAT.
The MCAT. Okay, so that's the medical college admission test, right? The one they use in the US.
That's the one. It tests your science knowledge, how you think, stuff like that. And of course, coming from India, you'll need to prove your English skills, IELTS or TOEFL, things like that.
So those are the basics. But what really makes an application stand out? Is it all about the numbers or is there something more?
Well, good grades and scores are important, obviously, but they also look for well-rounded people. People who are passionate about medicine, want to help others, can handle the pressure.
So volunteering, clinical experience, maybe some research, that kind of thing.
Exactly. They want to see you're serious about this.
Yeah.
It's not just about the books. We actually read about this guy, Rohan, from Hyderabad. He struggled with the IELTS at first, but with some coaching, he aced it.
That's a good example. It shows that with the right kind of preparation, you can overcome those challenges.
Exactly. You just have to be strategic and persistent.
Now, I know we've been talking about the positives, but let's be real for a second. What are some of the challenges international students face? I mean, besides the tough competition.
Well, honestly, one of the biggest ones is just the limited spots. Canadian medical schools, they prioritize their own citizens, so there aren't as many places for international students.
I see. So you're up against the best from all over the world, basically.
Pretty much. It's a tough crowd.
Okay, so competition, limited spots. Anything else that might surprise people about the Canadian system?
One thing that stands out is their focus on ethics. Like from day one, they're talking about patient rights, informed consent, the doctor's responsibilities.
Interesting. So it's not just about the science, it's about the human side of medicine, too.
Exactly. They really emphasize that. Now, of course, we can't forget about the big one, the elephant in the room.
You mean the cost? Yeah, I was about to say, studying medicine in Canada, especially as an international student, that's got to be expensive.
It definitely is. But before we get into the numbers, let's take a break and come back for part two. We'll dive into those financial realities then.
Sounds good. We'll see you back here soon for more on the cost of studying medicine in Canada. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks here. We're talking about studying medicine in Canada. It sounds amazing, but it's got to be expensive, right?
Yeah, there's no way around it. It's a big investment, especially for international students. We're talking like tuition fees alone can be anywhere from 70,000 to 100,000 Canadian dollars per year.
Per year. Whoa. That's a lot. And I'm guessing that doesn't even include living expenses.
Nope, not at all. You got to factor in rent, food, transportation, all that stuff. It really adds up. You could easily be looking at another, say, 10,000 to 20,000 Canadian dollars per year on top of tuition, depending on where you live and, your lifestyle.
So all in all, we're talking about a pretty hefty price tag. For a lot of students, especially coming from abroad, I imagine that could seem like an impossible hurdle.
It's a real concern, for sure, but it's not insurmountable. There are ways to make it work. Scholarships, grants, loans, there are options out there.
You mentioned scholarships. Are there any specific ones for international students who want to study medicine in Canada?
Oh, absolutely. Some universities have scholarships just for that.
Yeah.
Like the University of Toronto has this one. It's called the Lester B. Pearson International Scholarship.
What's that one like?
It's pretty incredible, actually. It covers your tuition, books, living expenses, even residence fees for 4 whole years.
Wow, that's amazing. That would be a game changer for
It
someone.
really would. And there are others too. The Ontario Trillium Scholarship, that's a big one. It gives 40,000 Canadian dollars per year to PhD students.
PhD students, okay. So not specifically for med school then.
Not specifically, no.
Yeah.
But there's also the Vanier Canada Graduate Scholarship. That one's 50,000 a year, and it can be for health-related fields.
I see. So there are some pretty significant scholarships out there. It's encouraging to know that there's support available.
For sure. It takes some effort to find them and apply, but it's definitely worth it.
All right, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the application process itself. It seems pretty daunting, to be honest, especially if you're not familiar with how things work in Canada. Where do you even begin?
Well, the first thing is you got to nail down your bachelor's degree. And not just any degree. You need a good GPA to even be considered for medical school.
So basically, you need a plan for your undergrad years even before you think about applying to med school. Are there specific pre-med programs that are better than others?
Not really, no. It's more about choosing something you're interested in and doing well in it. Canadian medical schools, they want to see a solid science background, of course, but they also look for well-rounded students.
Okay, so it's not about following a specific path. It's more about showing your strengths and your passion.
Exactly. Then, of course, there's the MCAT. You got to tackle that beast.
Right, the MCAT, we talked about that earlier. I imagine that takes a lot of preparation.
Oh, yeah. It's not something you can just wing. You need a good study plan, lots of practice, the whole 9 yards.
It sounds intense.
It is. But manageable if you approach it strategically. And don't forget about taking care of yourself during the process. Sleep, good food, stress management, it all makes a difference.
That's good advice. It's easy to get caught up in the pressure and forget about the basics. So good grades, good MCAT score. What else are they looking for?
One of the most important things is your personal statement. This is your chance to tell your story, explain why you want to be a doctor, what experiences have shaped you.
I see. So it's not just a list of accomplishments. It's more about who you are as a person.
Exactly. It's about showing your passion, your motivation, your commitment. Be genuine, be reflective. Think about what makes you tick.
It sounds like it takes a lot of thought and introspection to write a good one.
It does, but it's worth the effort. It's your chance to really connect with the admissions committee on a personal level.
And then, of course, you need letters of recommendation, right?
Yep, those are crucial. You want letters from people who know you well, who can speak to your abilities and your character. Professors, mentors, doctors you've shadowed. People like that.
So it's important to build strong relationships with those people throughout your undergrad years.
Absolutely, and give them plenty of time to write those letters. Don't spring it on them last minute.
Good point. Now, some schools also do interviews, right? What are those like?
It depends on the school, but they usually want to see how you communicate, how you think critically, your ethical reasoning, that kind of thing.
So it's not just about spitting out memorized answers. You have to be able to think on your feet.
For sure. Be prepared to talk about your experiences, your motivations, your thoughts on healthcare. They want to see if you're a good fit for the program.
It sounds a little nerve-wracking, to be honest.
It can be.
Yeah.
But the best way to prepare is to practice. Do mock interviews, think about the questions they might ask, that sort of thing.
All right, so we've covered grades, MCAT, personal statement, letters of recommendation, interviews. Is there anything else students should keep in mind?
One thing that's often overlooked is understanding the Canadian healthcare system. Medical schools, they want to see that you're not just interested in medicine in general, but specifically in practicing in Canada.
So do some research on how healthcare works in Canada. Show them you've thought about it.
Exactly. It demonstrates your commitment. And honestly, the whole process can feel overwhelming, especially for international students. There are services out there that can help. We read about this one student, Arav. He used a service called LetzStudy.
What's that?
They basically guide you through the whole thing, help you choose a pre-med program, write your personal statement, even navigate the visa process. It's like having a personal coach.
That could be really helpful, especially if you're feeling lost and confused.
Oh, definitely. Having that support can make a huge difference.
Okay, so let's say you've done all that. You've aced the application process. You've gotten into a Canadian medical school. What's next? What's life like as a medical student in Canada?
Well, congratulations. First of all, give yourself a pat on the back. That's a huge accomplishment. Now, get ready for a wild ride. It's going to be tough, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
I bet. Canadian medical schools are known for their tough programs, right?
Oh, yeah, they're rigorous.
Yeah.
But they also really emphasize hands-on learning. You're not just stuck in a classroom all day.
What do you mean?
Well, you'll have hospital visits, patient interactions, simulations. You're exposed to the clinical environment right from the start. They want you to apply what you're learning in a real-world setting.
That makes sense. So it's not just about memorizing facts. It's about actually developing your skills as a doctor.
Exactly. But it's not all about academics either. You'll also be adjusting to a new culture, building a support system, trying to stay on top of everything. It's a lot to juggle.
It sounds like it. You need to be resilient, adaptable, and have a good support network.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay.
So now, let's fast forward again. You've graduated, you've got your MD. What happens then?
That's a good question. What's the next step?
Well, that's where things get really exciting. It's time for residency.
Residency, okay. So that's where you specialize, right?
Yep. You pick an area of medicine that you're passionate about, surgery, pediatrics, whatever it might be, and you spend a few years really honing your skills.
Sounds intense.
It is, but it's also the most rewarding part of the whole journey.
Yeah.
You're finally putting all that knowledge and training into practice. But before we get into all the details of residency and what comes after, let's take a break and come back for the final part of this deep dive.
Sounds good. We'll see you back here soon for more on life after medical school in Canada. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
So we've covered a lot of ground, the Canadian MD, the application process, the finances, but let's say you've done it all, you've graduated. Now what? What happens after med school in Canada?
Well, now the real fun begins. It's residency time.
Residency, right. That's where you specialize, like in surgery or pediatrics or something.
Exactly. You pick a field you're passionate about and really dive deep. Residency programs, they usually last, I don't know, maybe 3 to 7 years, depending on the specialty.
Wow, so that's a pretty big commitment again.
It is. But this is where you really hone your skills, working alongside experienced doctors in a real hospital setting. It's intense, but it's also where you really come into your own as a physician. I bet. So you graduate, you do your residency. Is that when you're officially a licensed doctor in Canada?
Not quite. There's one more hurdle to clear. You have to pass the Medical Council of Canada qualifying examination, the MCCQE Part 1.
Ah, another exam. Okay. So pass that, finish your residency, then you're good to go. What's the job market like for new doctors in Canada?
Yeah, but it's actually pretty good. Canada needs more doctors, especially in certain areas. So yeah, job prospects are generally strong. And the cool thing is, a Canadian MD, it's recognized all over the world. You could even practice internationally if you wanted to.
That's pretty awesome. So global recognition, high demand in Canada. What about the money side of things? I know it's kind of a taboo subject, but it's something a lot of aspiring doctors think about.
Of course. And it's a fair question. Look, doctors in Canada, they're well compensated. It's demanding work. It takes years of training, so the pay reflects that. But at the end of the day, this is a career about helping people, about making a difference in their lives. That's got to be the driving force. Definitely. It's got to be about more than just the paycheck. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of positives. But let's be honest, there are challenges too. What are some of the hurdles people might face along the way, besides the obvious ones like the long years of study and the intense workload?
Well, one thing that can be tough is the residency match. There are only so many spots, especially in the really popular specialties. You might not always get your first choice.
Ah, I see. So even after all that work, there's still a bit of uncertainty.
Yeah, that's true. It can be a little stressful. But it's important to remember that you're not alone. There's a lot of support out there. And even if you don't get your top choice, there are still so many amazing paths you can take in medicine.
That's a good point. It's about being flexible, adapting, finding the right fit for you. So as we wrap up this whole deep dive, what are the big things people should take away from all this? If someone's thinking about studying medicine in Canada, what should they really keep in mind?
Number one, be prepared for a long haul. It's a big commitment, and it takes a lot of hard work and dedication.
Right. And number two?
Don't underestimate the application process. Start early, do your research, and don't be afraid to ask for help. There are resources out there.
And even though it's expensive, don't let the costs scare you off. There are ways to make it work.
Absolutely. There are scholarships, grants, all sorts of options.
And finally, remember why you're doing this. It's not about the money. It's not about the prestige. It's about helping people.
It's about making a difference in the world. At the end of the day, that's what really matters.
Well said. So if you're listening to this and thinking about taking this path, ask yourself, does this challenge excite you? Does the thought of dedicating your life to medicine, to healing, does that light a fire in you?
If it does, take that first step. Start researching, reach out to people, explore your options. Every journey starts somewhere. And the journey to becoming a doctor in Canada, it's a challenging one, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Couldn't agree more. So that wraps up our deep dive into studying medicine in Canada. Thanks for joining us. And remember, if you have a dream, don't let anything hold you back. Go for it.